The wagon wheels groaned across the dry earth, their squeaks echoing like a death knell in the still morning. Dust rose with every turn, coating the girl's dress, her hair, her trembling hands. She sat stiffly on the splintered bench, back straight, eyes fixed ahead though she dared not meet her father's gaze. 18. That was all she was. Just 18 years on this hard earth, and already the world had chewed her up and decided her fate. Her chest tightened with every bump of the road, her breath shallow as though her lungs refused to draw the air. Somewhere in her mind, a voice whispered, "Run." But her legs felt made of stone. Beside her, her father's jaw worked against the tobacco he chewed. His eyes were set like iron, face carved deep with worry, shame, and determination. He had the look of a man about to auction off his last cow, except this time, it wasn't cattle he was giving away. It was blood. Flesh. His own daughter. "You'll be taken care of," he muttered finally, as though repeating it could make it true. "Better than what I can give. Better than what this town'd ever give you." His words were meant to soothe, but they rang like the rattle of shackles. She pressed her lips together, clutching the bundle of belongings on her lap, a folded dress, a comb, a little Bible, the only things she could claim as her own. The ranch came into view before noon, rising like a fortress from the sea of golden grass. A great timber house, weather-beaten but sturdy. Corrals stretched wide, cattle shifting inside them, their low moans drifting on the hot wind. Outbuildings leaned against the earth, tough and utilitarian. And there, near the porch, a man stood. Her heart stumbled. He was broad-shouldered, his face shaded by a hat pulled low, a rifle resting casually in the crook of his arm. Even from a distance, she could see the hard lines etched around his mouth. A man used to command. A man who had buried someone, she could see it in the hollows of his eyes. That was him. The widower. The rancher. The man who, with one word, could make her a wife. The wagon lurched to a halt. Her father spat the tobacco onto the dirt, wiped his mouth, and jumped down. His boots struck the ground like gunshots. She followed, her knees wobbling. When her shoes touched the dust, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes watching. Ranch hands leaned against fence posts, pausing their work. Two boys, one about 12, the other younger, stood near the porch. A little girl clung to the rail, thumb in her mouth. The rancher's gaze traveled over her once. Not with hunger. Not with kindness either. Just, calculation. "You got her," her father said flatly, not looking at her. "Like I promised." The rancher didn't answer right away. He lowered the rifle, leaned it against the porch, and came forward. Up close, he looked older than she expected. Early 30s, maybe, though his face was weathered by sun and grief. His jaw was rough with stubble, his eyes a storm gray that revealed nothing. "What's her name?" he asked finally. Her father answered for her. "Mary. Mary." Her name sounded foreign on her father's tongue, like he'd already washed his hands of it. The rancher's gaze stayed on her for a heartbeat longer. Then he nodded once. "I'll see to it she's fed." That was all. No welcome. No softening of tone. Just an agreement, like she was another piece of equipment delivered to the ranch. Her father exhaled, shoulders slumping. "She's yours now." The word struck her like a blow. She wanted to scream, "I'm not his. I'm not anyone's." But her voice failed. Her father turned then, without ceremony, without a lingering glance, climbed back into the wagon, and drove away. The wheels rumbled, the dust swallowed him, and in less than a minute, he was gone. Mary stood rooted to the earth, staring at the empty trail. A hollowness spread in her chest, deeper than hunger, colder than fear. She was abandoned. Given away like a lamb at market. The rancher's voice cut into her fog. Inside. She turned. His gray eyes held no warmth, only command. She obeyed, her skirts brushing the dirt as she climbed the steps. The three children parted for her, the eldest boy glaring openly, the daughter's lip curled in a sneer. Only the youngest, perhaps 6 years old, watched her with something like confusion. The house swallowed her. It smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something faintly sour, like a home where grief lingered too long. Shadows clung to the corners despite the sun streaming through the windows. "This way," the rancher said. He led her to a small room at the back. Bare walls, a narrow bed, a dresser. Nothing more. "You'll sleep here." She clutched her bundle tighter. "Yes, sir," she whispered, though the words scraped her throat. He hesitated at the door, eyes flicking to her once more. "This ain't what I asked for," he muttered low, almost to himself. Then he shut the door, leaving her alone. Her knees buckled. She sank onto the bed, pressing her face into her hands. Hot tears burned, but she forced them down. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing her cry. That night, the house creaked under the weight of silence. Mary lay awake in the narrow bed, her bundle beside her, her eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling. She tried to pray, but the words tangled in her throat, then voices drifted through the thin walls. "Why'd you take her?" a ranch hand asked in the kitchen, voice thick with whiskey. The rancher answered, low and clipped. "Man begged me. Said she'd starve if I didn't. Didn't want her. Don't need her. But I ain't heartless enough to turn her away." Laughter followed, bitter and sharp. "Ain't heartless, maybe, but you ain't foolish either. A young virgin under your roof, most men call that a blessing." Mary's heart froze. The rancher's reply came like thunder. "She's no blessing. She's another burden." The words sliced her chest open. She pressed her fist to her mouth to stifle the sob. She had been traded like cattle, discarded by her father, unwanted by her husband. And yet, deep in the wound, something stirred. Not anger. Not despair. Something fiercer. A vow. If they thought she was just a burden, just a virgin to be pitied or mocked, they were wrong. She would prove them wrong. And she would never, never, be discarded again. The rooster crowed long before dawn, its shrill cry cutting through the thin walls of Mary's room. She sat up with a start, her heart hammering as though she had been summoned to judgment. The house was already alive, the sound of boots thudding against the floorboards, the hiss of the stove catching fire, the low murmur of children's voices. She tied her hair back with trembling fingers, slipped into the plain dress she had folded neatly, and stepped out. The kitchen greeted her like an enemy. The eldest boy, Thomas, sat at the table sharpening a knife with deliberate strokes, his eyes narrowed in contempt. The daughter, Clara, barely 10, perched on a chair, swinging her legs, a smirk playing at her lips. The youngest, Samuel, clutched a wooden toy horse, looking at her with wide, unblinking eyes. The rancher sat at the head of the table, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the flames in the stove. He didn't acknowledge her. Mary swallowed. "Good morning," she whispered. Clara snickered. "You sound like a scared rabbit." Thomas grinned, cruel and sharp. "She'll run off in a week. Mark my words." Mary clenched her hands, heat flooding her cheeks, but she said nothing. Instead, she moved toward the stove, where a pan and some eggs sat waiting. She had cooked before, simple meals for her father, but under the weight of their stares, her hands fumbled. An eggshell cracked into the pan, fragments sinking into the yolk. "Can't even cook proper," Thomas muttered. Clara giggled, hiding her mouth behind her hand. The rancher finally spoke, his voice low, steady. "Eat what's put in front of you." The children fell silent, but Mary didn't miss the flicker of shame on Thomas's face, or the way Clara rolled her eyes. She kept her head down, flipping the eggs, fighting the urge to cry. By midday, the sun scorched the earth, and Mary's back ached from hauling water and sweeping floors. The ranch was no place for softness, every task demanded strength she wasn't sure she had. Still, she pushed on, sweat dripping down her temples, determined not to falter. But the children made sure her struggle was noticed. "Don't carry it like that," Thomas sneered as she lugged a bucket of water. "You'll spill it all." Clara mimicked her gait, wobbling exaggeratedly until she tripped and laughed. "She walks like a baby deer." Mary bit her lip, her arms trembling from the weight. She didn't answer. She couldn't. If she did, she feared she'd scream. Only Samuel's eyes followed her without cruelty. Once, when she stumbled and nearly dropped the bucket, his small hand reached out as though to help, but Thomas pulled him back. "Don't waste your time." Mary caught her breath and forced herself upright. They thought her weak, a burden. But she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the rancher strode into the yard, rifle slung across his shoulder. His presence drew silence like a storm cloud. He scanned the corral, eyes narrowing at the restless cattle. "Tracks," he said, voice clipped. "Bandits have been nosing around." The ranch hands muttered, tightening their grips on lassos and shotguns. Mary froze. Bandits. The word alone carried the smell of blood and smoke, the whisper of lawless men who took what they pleased. "Keep the young ones inside tonight," the rancher ordered, his gaze sweeping past Mary without resting. Windows shut. Lamps low. That night, Mary tucked Samuel into bed, his small fingers clutching her sleeve. "Will the bad men come?" he whispered. Her throat tightened. She brushed the hair from his forehead. "Not if we're brave." "Are you brave?" he asked, eyes wide. She wanted to lie. Instead, she whispered, "I'll try to be." The night dragged, heavy and tense. Mary lay awake, every creak of the house setting her heart racing. The wind rattled the shutters, the cattle lowed uneasily in the distance. Then, gunfire. It split the silence like lightning. Shouts followed, the thundering of hooves, the crack of rifles. Mary leapt from bed, her bare feet cold against the floor. She rushed to the children's room, where Clara and Thomas crouched by the window, eyes wide. "Stay back," she hissed, pulling them away. Samuel whimpered, clutching his toy horse. Through the window, she caught flashes of chaos, shadows darting between barns, the glow of lanterns swinging wildly, the rancher firing from the porch with deadly precision. The bandits shouted curses, their faces hidden beneath bandanas. Another shot rang out, closer this time. A figure broke from the dark, charging toward the house. Mary's blood iced. "Down," she cried, dragging the children to the floor just as a bullet shattered the window, glass spraying across the room. Clara screamed. Thomas cursed, Samuel buried his face in her lap. Her chest heaved. She had never been so close to death. Outside, the rancher's voice roared, deep and commanding. "Get back, you bastards." His rifle barked in answer, each shot crisp and sure. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was only minutes. Finally, the gunfire slowed, the shouts retreating into the night. Hooves thundered into the distance. Silence fell again, broken only by the groans of the wounded cattle. Mary's arms shook as she held the children close. She could still feel the glass biting her skin, still hear the echo of bullets in her skull. The door banged open. The rancher stormed in, face grim, shirt streaked with sweat. His eyes swept the room, locking on Mary. She braced for anger. For blame. Instead, he said, "You kept them down." "Good." His tone wasn't warm. But it wasn't cold, either. It was, respect. For the first time, his eyes truly saw her. The next morning, smoke still lingered over the scorched barn. Men tended to wounded cattle, muttering about bandits and vengeance. Mary moved through the wreckage quietly, sweeping debris, fetching water, mending what she could. Her hands bled, her muscles ached, but she didn't falter. She couldn't. Later, she overheard voices by the well. Two neighbors, come to help, stood whispering. "Did you hear?" one said, jerking his thumb toward her. "The girl ain't even his real wife. Just some virgin her pa handed over. Won't last a season." The other chuckled. "Pretty thing like that? Ranch'll tire of her fast. Mark my words, she'll be gone before winter." Mary's grip tightened on the bucket handle. Their words stabbed deeper than glass. She turned away before they could see the tears burning her eyes. That night, as the house settled into uneasy quiet, she sat alone by the window, staring at the stars. Her reflection trembled in the glass, a girl too young, too fragile for the life forced upon her. But beneath the fear, something stronger stirred. They thought she was a burden. They thought she was weak. They thought she wouldn't last. She would prove them wrong. Even if it broke her. Morning came with the smell of ash still lingering in the air. The barn smoldered like a half-dead giant, black scars carved across its timbers. Men hammered, sawed, rebuilt. Life didn't pause for grief on a ranch. The cattle still needed tending, the fences still needed mending, the prairie still demanded labor from every hand it could claim. And Mary was done being useless. She rose before dawn, rolling up her sleeves, blistered palms aching but ready. She stumbled at first, spilling grain, dropping buckets, nearly tangling herself in a saddle strap, but she refused to quit. Every mistake earned laughter from the ranch hands, mutters from Clara, scorn from Thomas. But every day, she got a little steadier. She learned to carry 2 buckets without spilling. She learned to patch shirts with stitches tight enough to withstand ranch life. She even learned to ride, though the first attempt ended with her face first in the dirt, Clara laughing so hard she nearly fell from the fence. Like watchin' a calf learn to walk, one ranch hand drawled, spitting into the dust. Mary dusted herself off, chin high. "Then I'll walk. And after that, I'll run." The men blinked, surprised at the steel in her voice. Even Thomas gave a grudging smirk. Bit by bit, Mary carved herself into the rhythm of the ranch. The children were the hardest. Thomas kept his distance, bristling like a cornered wolf. He refused her food, scowled when she offered help, and only spoke to her when it was to remind her she wasn't his mother. Clara mocked her at every chance, calling her the gift, repeating the cruel whispers she'd heard in town. Only Samuel clung to her, still small enough to seek warmth where he could find it. One evening, she found him crying on the porch, his toy horse broken in his hands. Clara snapped it, he sniffled. Said Mama ain't here to fix it. Mary knelt, taking the pieces gently. Then I'll fix it, she whispered. She stayed up late, sewing leather, carving a new leg from a scrap of wood. When Samuel woke to find the horse whole again, his eyes lit with wonder. Thank you, Mary, he whispered, hugging her tight. The sound of her name, spoken not as an accusation, but with trust, was like balm to her soul. Even Clara softened, though she fought it. When Mary defended her against a cruel ranch hand who mocked her for crying after falling from a pony, Clara spat, I didn't need your help. But the next day, she followed Mary into the kitchen, silent, and peeled potatoes by her side. As for Thomas, his walls cracked slower. But one evening, Mary found him in the corral, fists clenched, tears hidden in the shadows. She ain't comin' back, he muttered, voice raw. Mama's gone, and you ain't her. Mary swallowed hard, her own grief clawing at her chest. I know, she whispered. I'm not here to replace her. But maybe I can still stand with you. For the first time, Thomas didn't push her away. He just stood there, shoulders shaking, letting the night hide his tears. The rancher watched all of it in silence that he kept his distance still, his voice clipped when he gave orders, his expression carved in stone. But Mary caught glimpses, the way his eyes softened when Samuel reached for her hand, the way his lips pressed tight when Clara's laughter slipped free, the way his shoulders eased when Thomas accepted her help with the cattle. One night, a storm rolled over the plains. Thunder shook the windows, rain hammered the roof. The children huddled in the parlor, lamps flickering. The rancher stood at the window, staring into the black. Mary lingered near the fire, her needle trembling in her hand as she mended a torn shirt. Lightning split the sky, revealing the sharp lines of his face, the weight etched into his eyes. "You should sit," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Storm'll pass. You've been standing since dusk." His silence stretched. Then he said, "Lo, you don't understand. Every storm like this, it takes me back. The night she died." Mary's breath caught. He had never spoken of his wife. "She took sick," he said, voice flat but trembling at the edges. "Fever took her fast. By the time I got the doctor, it was too late. Thunder was rollin', rain beatin' the roof. I couldn't save her." Mary's eyes burned. She set the shirt aside, standing near him but not too close. "You blame yourself." His jaw flexed. "A man's supposed to protect his family. I failed. Now all I've got left is a ranch too big and 3 kids who hate me." His gaze finally shifted to her, storm-gray eyes searching. "And a girl I never asked for." Mary's chest tightened, the words cutting deep. She wanted to shrink away, but instead, she lifted her chin. "You may not have asked for me," she said, her voice steady despite the quiver in her heart, "but I'm here. And I won't run." For the first time, his mask cracked. Not much, but enough. The storm raged outside, but inside, something shifted. Days later, the outlaws returned. They came at dusk, slipping through the tall grass like shadows. A lantern was hurled into the barn, flames erupting in a roar. Cattle bellowed, the ranch hands shouted, rifles cracked. Mary was in the kitchen when the firelight flared across the window. She froze for half a heartbeat, then ran. "Mary, no!" Thomas shouted as she burst into the yard, skirts flying. But Samuel's voice pierced the night. "The horses!" The barn blazed, animals screaming in terror. Without thinking, Mary grabbed a bucket, then another, racing toward the inferno. Heat scorched her face. Smoke clawed her lungs, but she pushed on. Inside, the fire roared like a beast. Flames licked the rafters, sparks rained down. The horses thrashed, eyes rolling white. Mary's heart pounded, fear clawing, but something fiercer driving her. "Easy," she shouted, her voice breaking. She threw water, yanked at ropes, coughed until her chest burned. One horse bolted free, another followed. A third reared, hooves striking sparks from the floor. A beam cracked overhead, splinters raining. Mary stumbled, nearly crushed. Smoke blinded her, her dress smoldered at the hem. She dragged herself forward, fumbling with the last knot, tears streaming from the sting of smoke. Then arms seized her, lifting her bodily. The world spun. She was carried out into the night, into the cool air, just as the barn's roof collapsed in a roar of flames. She coughed, gasped, choking on smoke. When her vision cleared, she saw his face above her, ashen, furious, terrified. The rancher. "Are you mad?" he growled, his voice shaking. "You could have burned alive." Mary tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "The horses. Damn the horses." His eyes blazed. "I thought I lost you." The words struck her harder than the fire ever could. For the first time, she heard fear in his voice. Not anger. Not command. Fear, for her. He crushed her to his chest, his arms trembling. She felt his heart hammering, as wild as her own. And in that moment, through the smoke and the fire, Mary knew, she was no longer just a burden. Something had changed. Something that neither of them could ever take back. The morning after the storm dawned clear. The ranch lay quiet, wrapped in the hush that only comes after something violent has passed. The land was drenched, the air sweet, the sky blue as polished glass. But inside Mary, another kind of storm brewed, one that had nothing to do with the weather. She stood on the porch, arms folded, watching the horizon. For the first time since she had been given away, like property, she felt something strange in her chest. Not fear. Not even sorrow. Strength. It was rising inside her like the river after the rains, impossible to hold back. Behind her, the children were already awake, laughing, arguing, living. And Daniel? He was different too. The hardness in his shoulders had eased, the silence between them filled now with something unspoken, something fragile but real. But life on the frontier had no patience for fragile things. The news came by rider, dust on his boots, urgency in his voice. Outlaws. Again. This time they weren't passing through. They were coming for Daniel's cattle, for blood, for anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. Daniel saddled his horse. His jaw was tight, his rifle gleaming in the morning sun. Mary felt that familiar stab of fear, but then came something else. Defiance. "You'll need help," she said, stepping forward. He turned, startled. "Mary, no. Stay here. Protect the children." Her chin lifted. "I've been afraid long enough. You said once this land changes people. Well, it's changed me." For a moment, their eyes locked. And then Daniel nodded, slow but sure. The fight came at dusk. Shadows stretched long across the plains, and the thunder of hooves broke the quiet. Outlaws, rough-faced and hungry-eyed, rode in like a swarm of locusts. Daniel fired the first shot. The children huddled in the house, Mary beside them with her shotgun steady. Her hands trembled, until she heard Daniel's voice shouting orders, until she saw him fall and rise again in the dust. Then something snapped inside her. She stepped onto the porch, heart hammering, hair loose in the wind. One outlaw raised his gun at Daniel. Mary didn't think, she acted. The shotgun kicked against her shoulder, the blast echoing like thunder. The man dropped. Silence, for half a breath. Then chaos. Bullets tore the air. Horses screamed. The ranch became a battlefield, dust rising with smoke and fire. Mary reloaded, fired, reloaded again, the acrid scent of gunpowder filling her lungs. Fear had no place anymore, not when Daniel's life and the children's lives hung in the balance. When the last outlaw fell, the plains lay scattered with the wreckage of violence. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by ragged breaths. Daniel staggered toward her, bleeding but alive. His eyes met hers. And in them, she saw it at last, recognition. Respect. And something deeper, something that went beyond gratitude. "You saved me," he whispered. Mary lowered the shotgun, her hands raw, her heart pounding. She wanted to weep, to laugh, to collapse. Instead, she only said, "We saved each other." Weeks passed. The ranch healed, as did its people. Daniel carried his scars openly, but his voice grew softer, his laughter easier. The children clung to Mary, not out of fear anymore, but love. And Mary no longer felt like a girl given away. She was a woman who had claimed her place. Not by Daniel's hand, not by the church's words, not by the weight of duty, but by fire, sweat, and the courage she had carved out of her own trembling bones. One evening, she walked the fields alone. The wind tugged at her dress, carrying with it the scent of sage and the sound of distant coyotes. She thought of her father, how he had handed her off as if she were nothing more than a burden. And she thought of the girl she had been, small, frightened, silent. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone the West itself had forged. Someone who had faced storms, guns, grief, and love, and had not broken. She whispered into the wind, almost as if speaking to the girl she had been, "You're free now." And as the story closed, the narrator's voice would draw the audience close, almost conspiratorial, as if sharing a secret meant only for them. Mary was given away at 18, still a virgin, still a girl, still broken. But the Wild West had a way of burning weakness and leaving behind steel. She came to that ranch as a possession. She stayed as a wife. She became a mother. But most of all, she became herself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, remember, the frontier never gives, it only tests who's strong enough to take.